In a dimly lit room, shadows flickered as the video began to play, illuminating the faces of those gathered. A palpable tension filled the air, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The narrator's voice, calm yet intense, beckoned the viewers to consider a profound question. What if the very foundations of their faith had been built upon interpretations colored by cultural and societal biases? As the words hung in the air, a wave of reflection washed over the group, each person pausing to feel the weight of the inquiry. The room pulsed with emotion as the narrator continued to weave a narrative that spoke of historical exoduses, not just as echoes of the past, but as catalysts for future movements that could redefine their understanding of faith, identity, and community. The flicker of the screen mirrored the flicker of hope igniting within them, a hope that the marginalized voices of history could take center stage in a story often told from a singular perspective. Among the viewers was a young woman named Amina, her heart racing as she absorbed the words. Growing up in a world where she often felt unseen, Amina had struggled with her own identity, navigating the complexities of faith and cultural heritage. The thought that her history, intertwined with the struggles of countless others, might be more than mere footnotes in scripture, struck a chord deep within her. As the video progressed, the narrator spoke of global migrations and spiritual awakenings, trends that seemed to resonate with Amina's own experiences of transition and renewal. She recalled her family's stories of resilience, how they had crossed borders and cultures, echoing the very themes of Exodus discussed on screen. The narrator's voice grew more compelling, urging the viewers to dive deeper into the scriptures, ancient artifacts, and DNA revelations that could illuminate their pasts. Amina felt as if she were unearthing a hidden family heirloom, one that could prove transformative. The video promised a challenge to their understanding of biblical figures, nudging them to contemplate who the Israelites truly were, and why many had been overlooked in traditional teachings. Imagine sharing this discovery in a group discussion, building a collective insight, the narrator encouraged. Amina's mind raced with the possibilities, envisioning herself in a room full of diverse voices, each sharing their unique narratives and experiences, each journey carrying the weight of their ancestors' struggles. The tension in the room tightened when the narrator invited them to reflect on the descriptions of biblical figures, Jesus with hair like wool and skin like burnished brass. Amina felt her heart swell with pride as she envisioned a representation of Christ that mirrored her own identity, one that felt authentic and deeply intertwined with her heritage. The weight of Jeremiah's declaration, "I am black," resonated within her, igniting a sense of empowerment. As the video unfolded, discussions shifted towards the prophecies of Deuteronomy, the chilling warnings of captivity, and the striking parallels with historical injustices. Amina's pulse quickened. The words felt like echoes of her ancestors' painful pasts, a narrative of survival that linked her to a broader human struggle. The imagery of chains and dispersion was visceral, evoking an understanding of shared trauma that transcended time and space. Finally, the narrator posed a question that lingered in the air. "Are you ready to explore what's been there all along?" The room fell silent, the weight of the inquiry settling on each individual like a heavy blanket. Amina closed her eyes, envisioning herself standing on the precipice of a new understanding, ready to engage in discussions that could reshape her view of history, faith, and belonging. As the video came to a close, Amina knew this was not merely an exploration of scripture. It was a call to justice, to identity, to empathy. It was an invitation to rediscover the stories that had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for those brave enough to seek them out. She felt a sense of unity with her fellow viewers, each poised to carry these revelations into their communities, to engage in a collective dialogue that could ripple through generations. And as the lights flickered back on, Amina felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to be part of a movement, ready to reclaim her narrative, and ready to inspire others to do the same. In the shadow of the ancient pyramids, where the sun dips low and the golden sands whisper tales of time, a group of scholars gathered, their brows furrowed in contemplation. David Eltis and David Richardson, both men of profound insight and heavy hearts, stood before a weathered parchment, the ink of ages flowing with the weight of history. They spoke not merely of dates and events, but of lives lost, identities erased, and a narrative that spanned continents. Imagine, if you will, David Eltis began, his voice a low rumble, echoing through the still air. Millions of Africans torn from their homelands, packed like cargo into the dark holds of ships. Imagine the cries of children, wrenched from their mothers' arms, their names stripped away, their languages silenced. We cannot view this as mere coincidence. It parallels the ancient prophecies of old. As he spoke, the room filled with a palpable tension, an electric charge that resonated deep within the souls of those present. The walls, adorned with faded maps and illustrations, seemed to close in, bearing witness to the weight of their discussion. David Richardson interjected, his voice rising in urgency. Deuteronomy 28 outlines curses that some scholars believe reflect the horrors of the slave trade. If we view the African people through the lens of these ancient texts, we may begin to understand their connection to the children of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What narratives emerge when we explore these connections? A murmur of agreement rippled through the scholars, each grappling with the implications. Their minds wandered beyond the pages of history, grappling with the emotional gravity of generational trauma that pulsed like a living entity in their midst. Then, as if summoned by the very words they spoke, the ghostly images of the past began to flicker to life. The scholars envisioned the children of Judah and Jerusalem, sold into distant lands, their identities scattered like leaves in a storm. They could almost hear the ancient words of Joel, reverberating from the walls, echoing the cries of those who had been commodified, treated as mere possessions. Yet amidst the sorrow, there lay a glimmer of hope. But the prophecies are not just curses, David Eltis reminded them, the light of revelation igniting his eyes. They speak of a return, a gathering. Deuteronomy 30 promises that after the suffering, after the scattering, there will be a reunion with the homeland, a reclaiming of lost identities. We must see this gathering unfolding in our world today. The atmosphere shifted, filled with a sense of possibility. They began to weave their thoughts together, discussing the myriad ways history had been interpreted, the narratives that had been shaped, and sometimes overlooked. They pondered the images of biblical figures, Moses, David, Jesus, depicted as European, their true identities obscured by a veil of misinterpretation. David Richardson spoke passionately. If we are to understand the essence of our shared humanity, we must challenge these narratives. Why do we see biblical figures as white Europeans, when the very context of their existence was rooted in Africa and the Middle East? What does this misrepresentation say about the power dynamics that have shaped our world? The dialogue grew intense, rich with emotion, as they explored how these perspectives had been perpetuated through art, education, and theology. They felt the weight of history pressing down on them. The painful recognition of how narratives were twisted to justify oppression, to overshadow the brilliance of African civilizations that had thrived long before the European conquest. As the night deepened, their discussions turned to the modern implications of these historical interpretations. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 marked a moment of hope for some, yet for others, it represented a struggle for acknowledgement and belonging. The Ethiopian Jews, whose histories intertwined with ancient lineages, faced challenges of recognition, their stories often overshadowed by political narratives. We must amplify these voices, bring forth their stories, and weave them into the fabric of our understanding, David Eltis urged, his heart heavy with the urgency of their discussion. The Lemba of Zimbabwe, the Igbo of Nigeria, each carries threads of a rich tapestry that deserves recognition. As the candles burned low, and the moon cast a silvery glow through the window, the scholars felt an emotional awakening, a stirring call to action. They envisioned forums where communities could share their experiences, where connections could be forged and healing could begin. They understood that to grapple with the past was not merely an academic exercise, but a pathway towards liberation and restoration. With a renewed sense of purpose, David Richardson concluded, "Let us commit to this journey together, to shed light on the hidden narratives, to redefine our understanding of identity, and to create a future where shared stories foster empathy and understanding among all people." As they left that dimly lit room, the weight of history lingered in the air. But so did the promise of a brighter tomorrow, a tomorrow where the lost could be found, and the scattered could gather once again, reclaiming their identities and their places in the world.